Welcome to Shahnameh, Book of Kings. Today we begin with the beginning of the war between Iran and Turan. Manuchehr had lived for 120 years, and the time had come for him to prepare for his last journey. His astrologers came to him and told him of the evidence of the skies. They could not see that his days would continue, and he should be ready to leave this world. They give him the bitter news that the glory of his sovereignty was dimmed, and said to him, "You will go to another place, and may you meet with God there. There is no fighting against death. You must do now whatever is necessary before your departure." When he heard the astrologer's advice, Manuchehr altered his court's customary procedures. He summoned priests and sages and opened his heart before them. He had Nozar brought before him and spoke with him at length. He said, "This royal throne is an illusion, a wind, and you should not tie your heart to it for eternity. I have striven with dangers and difficulties for 120 years, known great happiness and sickness, and faced my enemies in battle. The glory of Feridun inspired me, and with his advice I turned all injuries to my advantage. I fought against Son and savage Tur, and took revenge for the death of my grandfather Iraj. I rid the earth of misery, founded cities and fortresses. But now it is as if I had not ever seen or done the world. The reckoning has passed and gone into darkness. Life has left less potency than death. It is a tree whose leaves and fruits are poison. I have endured pain and sorrow, and now I bestow the imperial throne and treasures on you. I give you the royal crown, as Feridun gave it to me. Know that when you have experienced the world and has gone by, you must return to a better place. But the trace you leave behind you will last for long years. They must be such that they bring you praise. The men say of you that you were a man of pure race who enacted pure faith. See that you do not swerve aside from God's faith. It is this which brings good counsel. Never leave God's way, since both good and bad come from him. After I have gone, an army of Turks will come, and they will decide who sits on Persia's throne and who wears her crown. You have hard work ahead of you, and those you confront will sometimes be wolves, sometimes sheep." When he had finished speaking, tears stained his cheeks, and Nozar wept bitterly for him. He closed his royal eyes, coldly he sighed, and Manuchehr, Iran's great sovereign, died. All that remains now is his royal name, and words are all that constitute his fame. After the period of mourning for his father had ended, Nozar lifted the Kyanad crown above Saturn. He sat on Manuchehr's throne and held court, summoning his people and distributing wealth among them. But not many days passed before his mind turned towards injustice. Murmurings were heard on every side, and the world grew weary of this new king whose heart lived only for wealth and money, who had abrogated his father's customs, acted cruelly towards priests and advisers, and despised all men. Peasant revolts sprang up, and pretenders to the throne appeared, when the cries of protest spread and all the world was in turmoil. This unjust king was afraid and sent an envoy to Sam, who was fighting again in Gorsaran, with a message filled with flattery and asking for his help. When this letter reached Sam, he heaved a cold sigh. A cock crowed, the tin of drums and bugles was heard, and the land of Gorsaran advanced an army whose size would put the green oceans to shame. As he drew near Persia, her nobles went out to greet him. They gathered together quickly when they heard of his approach, and came before him on foot. They spoke at length about the injustices of Nozar, a king who had foolishly forsaken his father's ways. They said, "The world has been ruined by his depredations, and his good fortune sleeps. He does not know the ways of wisdom, and the royal far has departed from him. There would be nothing wrong if the hero Sam were to take his place on the royal throne. The world would flourish beneath his justice. Persia and her people support him. We are all his slaves. Our souls live for him, and we will be obedient to his will." But Sam answered them, "How could this please God? While Nozar, who is of royal lineage, sits on the throne, how could I wear the crown? Such a thing is impossible, and no one should listen to such talk. If even a daughter of Manuchehr occupied the throne and wore the royal crown, my pillow would still be the dust, and my eyes would rejoice to see her. If Nozar's heart has departed from his father's ways, this has not been going on for long. The iron is not yet so rusted that its splendor cannot be restored. I shall restore this divine fire and make the world look for his love again. Give up these ideas and reaffirm your loyalty to the king. If you do not obtain God's mercy and the king's love, Nozar's anger will engulf the world in flames." The nobles regretted what they had said and reaffirmed their loyalty, and the world was restored to peace by Sam's presence of mind. The nobles went before Nozar and expressed their contrition and reaffirmed their status as his subjects. The glory of Nozar's reign was restored, his royal far returned, and once more he ruled in peace. Sam advised Nozar on how to act justly, and then received the king's orders to return to battle. He left the court with fine gifts from Nozar: thrones, crowns, rings, slaves, horses with golden bridles, and 2 golden goblets filled with red rubies. And so the heavens turned. Dissatisfied with Nozar and feeling no love for him, news of Manuchehr's death reached the army of the Turks, and of those who wished Persia ill talked of the troubles that beset Nozar's reign. When the Turkish commander Pashang heard of this, he decided to invade Iran. He talked constantly to his father Zadsham and sighed bitterly over what had happened to Tur, remembering all that Manuchehr and his army had done. He called the chieftains and nobles of the country together, men like Agvast, Garvashas, Barman, and Golbad, who were a ravening lion in battle, as well as Vissa, who had command of his armies. His summoned champion was his son, Afrazab, who came quickly at the summons. He talked of Salm and Tur and said, "We should not hide our desire for revenge against the Persians beneath our robes. Whose mind is not incensed to think of their actions? Everyone knows what has been done to us, how evil they have been, how infamous, but we must dry our tears. It's time now for revenge, rebellion, and relentless war." When Afrazab heard his father's words, he forgot all thoughts of rest, food, and comfort. He stood before his father, his heart filled with the longing for revenge, and said, "Against wild lions I can stand and fight. I am the match for Persia's monarch's might. If Zadsham had but drawn his warlike sword, the world would be ruled by Persia's lord. If he'd been eager for a warrior's fame, Turan would not be overwhelmed with shame. But his descendants can wage war, and we will crush these Persians with our victory." Pashang's ambition flared up when he saw Afrazab with his lion's shoulders and mammoth might, his shadow that seemed to stretch for miles, his tongue like a cutting sword, and his heart like a foaming sea. He ordered him to unsheath his sword and lead the army against Iran. He saw his son as a worthy commander, someone fit to raise his head up to the sun, who after his own death would inherit the kingdom. When Afrazab left his father's presence, his head was filled with a longing for vengeance, his heart with impatience for battle. While preparations for war were being completed, Afrazab's brother, Algruiz, came to their father full of foreboding. He said, "My father, you are an experienced man, and you are a chief of the Turks. But consider, it is true that Manuchehr is gone, but Stam still commands their armies, and they have warriors like Karshap and Karin, as well as many others. You know what the ancient wolf did to Tur and Salm. My grandfather, Zadsham, was the king of Turan and the leader of the Turkish armies. His helmet touched the moon's sphere, but he never talked as Afrashab did, and never read in the Book of Vengeance during a time of peace. It would be better if we gave up these thoughts of rebellion, which bring disaster on us. Pashang said to his son, Afrazab is like a male lion set on the hunt, a war elephant ready for battle, and a grandson who does not seek revenge for his grandfather's shame is not worthy of his lineage. You should go with him and give him good advice. When the cloud loose their burden on the plains, and the mountains, slopes, and deserts turn to good pasturage for our horses, and plants grow to the height of heroes, when the world turns green with spring vegetation, that is the time to pitch your tents on the plains. When your heart rejoices in the spring's verdure and flowers, you should lead our army to Amol. Trample Destan and Gorgon beneath your cavalry's hoofs, and make their rivers run ruby red with blood. That was where Manuchehr set off from us on war of vengeance against Tur. See if you can confront Karin or Karshop there and overcome them. Make our ancestors' souls happy by your victories, and burn in the fires of chagrin the hearts of all those who wish us ill. Agruas said to his ambitious father, I shall make their rivers flow with the blood of vengeance. When spring's new growth gave the plains the appearance of silk, the Turks prepared for battle. Armies gathered from Turan and China, and joined with warriors armed with maces from the west. So massive were their forces that they had neither center nor edge, and Nozar's fortunes began to fade. The news that a Turkish army was approaching the Oxus reached Feridun's successor, and the Persian armies left the imperial palace and gathered on the plain under Karin's command. They set off for Destan, with Nozar following in the rear. The world was filled with rumors, and as the army came near Destan, the sun was obscured by their dust. Nozar's pavilion was pitched in front of the town. He had no desire to fight within the city walls, and did not delay there for long. Campaigning in Arman, Afrazab chose 2 Turkish chieftains, one named Sharmasis and the other Kazbaran, gave them a force of 30,000 cavalry, and sent them to march on Zovalistan, where they were to attack Zal. News had come that Sam was dead, and that Zal was building him a tomb. Afrazab was overjoyed at this, since he thought that the Persians' fortunes were declining. He marched to Destan, and pitched his pavilion opposite the town. Who could count his forces? But multiply 400 by 1,000, and you will have some notion of their army size. The very mountains and sand seemed to seethe with their presence, and all the desert was filled with warriors. On King Nozar's side there were 140,000 men, all mounted and ready for war. Afrazab surveyed his army, and at nightfall sent a messenger with a letter to Pashang, saying, We have sought to conquer the world, and it is within our grasp. If we reckon up the forces at Nozar's disposal, we see they are mere prey for us, and we shall hunt them down. And Sam is no longer there to fight for his king. Zal is busy building him a tomb, and does not have the strength to fight against us. Shamash has taken Zovastan, and wears their glittering crown. He is good to strike at the right moment, and to consult with those who are friendly and wise. If a man hangs back when he should act, he will not have an opportunity again. The messenger seemed to grow wings as he sped toward the king of Turan, whose splendor was like that of the sun. When dawn showed above the mountain, the advanced troops of Afrazab's army reached Destan. There was a Turk among them named Barman, and he said, I will shock these sleepers awake. There were 2 parsangs between the armies, and all the weapons and machinery of war were ready. Barman surveyed Nozar's army, and saw Nozar's pavilion. He went to the commander of the Turkish forces, told him of what he had observed, and said, How long do we hide our prowess? If the king will permit, I will challenge one of their men to single combat. Then they will see my valor, and consider no one but me to be a warrior. The wise Agruas said, And if Barman is defeated, our frontier forces will be disheartened, and we shall suffer a setback. We must choose some anonymous warrior, and then we shall not be biting our nails, waiting for the outcome. Afrazab's face flushed with shame as he listened to Agrua's, and with a frown on his face he said to Barman, "Put on your armor, string your bow. You are the best of our warriors, and there is no need to bite our nails when you fight." Barman returned to the battlefield and shouted towards Karin, the son of Kava, "What warrior from Nozar's army will fight against me in single combat?" Karin looked around at his men to see who would step forward to fight, but none of the famous fighters gave an answer except for the ancient warrior Kobad. The wise commander frowned at this. Kobad was his brother, and his words enraged him. He was so angry that tears stood in his eyes. How could it be that from all this great army and all these young warriors, an old man should be trying to fight? Karin was upset by Kobad's behavior, and in front of the army he said to them, "You've reached the age when you should forget about fighting, particularly against some fresh, young, and confident like Barman. He's a horseman with the heart of a male lion, and confident, and full of pride. You are an important leader of this army, and an advisor to the king. If your white beard is reddened with blood, all our warriors will lose heart. Our army will be broken, and the hearts of our friends will despair." Now, listen to Kobad's answer to the warlike Karin. He said, "The turning heavens have allotted me my life. My brother, you must know that our bodies are born to die, that warriors live to wear their helmets in war. From the time of the great Manuchehr until today, my heart has lived in sorrow. A man cannot reach the heavens while he is alive. He is the prey of death, which pursues us all. One dies from a sword blow in the midst of battle. Vultures and ravening lions devour his body. Spears and swords slash his head. Another dies in his bed. But it is certain that we must all die. If I am to leave this splendid world, my strong brother will take my place here. He will build me a royal tomb and perform the rites that love dictates. He will wrap my head in camphor, musk, and rosewater, and lay my body down for eternal rest. Allow me this, my brother. Farewell. May you flourish in this world." When he had finished speaking, he grasped his spear and went out to the battlefield like a maddened elephant. Barman said to him, "Time has delivered you to me. It would be better for you to wait, since fate itself is ready to demand your life from you." Kobad replied, "The world has given me my time. A man will die when his time has come, and cannot die before then." At that, he urged his black horse forward, giving no respite to his warlike soul. From dawn until the sun cast lengthened shadows, the two tried their strength against one another. But Barman was victorious at last. He sped onto the battlefield and cast a lance that struck Kobad, piercing his back. His spine was smashed. Slowly, he toppled, slack and lifeless, from the saddle to the ground. Thus died the hero, aged and renowned. Barman returned to Afrazab, his cheeks glittering with triumph, and he was given a robe of honor, the like of which no nobleman or subject had ever seen. When Kobad was killed, Karin led his forces out, and the two armies met like the mingling of two mighty oceans, so that the earth seemed to shake with their encounter. Karin rushed forward, and from the side of Turan, Garsavaz was equally quick to attack. The neighing of horses and the dust set up by the armies obscured the sun and the moon. The diamond glittered of steel weapons was dulled by blood. Dust swirled like rain clouds, making vermilion by the sun. Clouds reverberated with the din of drums, and swords ran with blood. Karin urged his horse this way and that, wielding his sword like fire, and as if diamonds rained down coral, except that the coral was men's souls. When Afrazab saw his prowess, he led his men toward them, and the two fought until night appeared over the mountains, and still their desire for vengeance remained unsatisfied. As night fell, Karin led his forces before Destan and came to Nozar's pavilion, his heart wrung by his brother's death. Nozar saw him and wept tears from his eyes that had been unable to sleep. He said, "My soul did not mourn like this even after Sam's death. May Kobad's soul be as resplendent as the sun, and may it be your fate to remain in this world eternally. There is no escape from the death we are born to, and the world is nothing but a cradle for the grave." Karin replied, "Since I was born, I have dedicated my body to death. It was Feridun who placed this helmet on my head, so that I could ride out to avenge Iraj. Since that day, I have not loosened my sword belt, nor laid down my sword. Now my brother, a man filled with dignity and wisdom, has died, and this will be my end too. May you live forever." Today, when battle overtook Pashang's son and part of his army was destroyed, he chose fresh troops, then saw me with my ox-headed mace, and came after me eager to fight. I came so close to him that we looked one another in the eye, but then he wove a magical spell, and both light and color disappeared before my sight. Night fell, and the world turned dark, and my arm was unable to strike. It seemed that time itself was ending, and the sky had retreated beneath the earth, and we had to draw back from the battle in the dust and the darkness. And here I end my tale for today, but I'll be back tomorrow with more, much more. Until tomorrow.